What is up, everyone? I am Gregory LaPerche, and today we are doing a late wrap-up and late TBR, but better late than never, I guess. First, we've got Royal Assassin, which I read, and there is a live show on Anitha's channel yesterday that I participated in. And yeah, overall, this is book 2 in Realm of the Elderlings. I liked this book less than the first one. It was longer. I felt like the plot was good, and I kind of liked some things in the plot, but we got to where we were going in a very slow way. And I feel like the agency that the characters had wasn't really used too much because there were other more powerful people who didn't want them to do anything. So then they were just like, okay, well, we won't do anything for a lot of this book. And yeah, to me, that was a little boring. But I'm hoping Assassin's Quest will be a little bit better. It's a little bit longer as well. So we shall see, I guess. And the thing about Assassin's Quest is, yes, I'm sure it's kind of slow and the plot could be faster, but it's probably a plot that kind of takes its time to get where it's going. But I think if the characters have more agency in the third book, I'll like it more. And I also feel like the plot in the third book might be more surprising, but who knows? I have not read it yet. Join my Discord if you want to see my reactions to this book later in the month of March. I read 3 books in March, and here is one of the other books I read. The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan. This is the 3rd book in Wheel of Time, and, it was fine. I'm probably stopping with Wheel of Time now. But Greg, how can you stop? The 4th book is one that people often consider the best book. Yes, I know, Wheel of Time fans, I know. And I know, like, the world opens up more and more interesting things happen, etc., etc. But I kind of like where the 3rd one ended in terms of having a closed off story. I don't really want to go into another book that I'm not really excited to go into and then have the world open up more. And in that situation, if I did not enjoy book 4, I would probably have preferred to stay on book 3 because the plot would have been more closed. But yeah, I have a video of my pros and cons of the Wheel of Time, so you guys can check that out. Basically, the TLDR is I like the first 3 books. I don't love them. I don't think they're amazing, and they have not done enough for me to want to continue on with the series. And again, even if I like book 4, I know people talk about the slog from book 7 to 11 or whatever, and I don't really want to go through that, to be quite honest, especially since I'm already not really loving the series so far, and I don't really love the characters. They're fine, but whatever. Up next is The Heroes, which I listened to on audiobook. This is by Joe Abercrombie, and I buddy read this with Joanna, and we talked about it, and it was fun. I have a review, she has a review, so go check those out if you are interested in Joe Abercrombie. But yeah, overall, I liked it. I think The Heroes is more of a good thing for people who like Joe Abercrombie's writing style and his grimdark world, because this book is set in the same world as the First Law trilogy and all his other stuff. Definitely read the First Law trilogy before you read The Heroes, because you get to learn about a lot of characters who are important. And yeah, even though The Heroes is technically a standalone, it definitely feels like part of that trilogy, even though a lot of the characters we're following around are different characters and stuff. But the world building and the conflict and the power structures and all of that requires you to read the First Law trilogy first for you to really enjoy The Heroes. So yeah, that's what I read. Now let's talk about my TBR. Morningstar, which I sadly did not get to. Hopefully I get to this soon. It's not too long. It'll probably get read hopefully in the middle of the month. Golden Sun was very good and enjoyable, and I'm hoping to feel the same way about Morningstar. I'm kind of on a cliffhanger because Golden Sun has a pretty crazy ending, and yeah, I'm really excited to get into this one. Up next, Jade Legacy, which I am starting officially for real this week. So I am very excited to finish out this series. Obviously, I very much like Jade City. Jade War was good, but I like it more as a friend. But Jade Legacy I hear very good things about overall, and I know Jade Legacy takes place over multiple decades, I believe. So we kind of get to see the conflict between the Green Bones clans go at a faster rate, and we'll see where it goes. This is kind of like a mafia story, so obviously, if you know anything about the mafia, they had a lot of influence like 100 years ago, and their influence has slowly dwindled as the decades have gone by. So we'll see how that works in this trilogy. Will it be like the real world where the mafia kind of loses their power? Or will they retain their power in a different way? Or will they consolidate their power? Who says it has to be anything like the real world whatsoever? So yeah, we'll see on that. We'll see what happens to everyone's favorite characters, who I will not mention because spoilers and stuff. But yeah, I'm excited to get to this one. Up next, we've got The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. I thought I was going to get to this book last month, but one, I kind of ran out of time, and two, I found out that the final book in this series is coming out in June, and I thought it was coming out earlier. So yeah, now that I know it's coming out in June, I can read the second book now, and then I can hang out and wait to read the third one closer to the release date of this fourth book. And yeah, I don't really know anything about this third book other than that it ends on a cliffhanger, so I'm kind of trying to line it up in this exact way. But yeah, The Grace of Kings was a great book. It feels very epic and very Asian inspired. And I believe this is inspired by the Three Kingdoms dynasty in Chinese history and like that sort of era, which I know very little about. So yeah, this feels very interesting and like a very new world. Also, the magic is not heavy-handed in this book at all. There's almost no talk of magic, to be honest. There's some sort of like steampunk elements, like they have airships and they drop like boiling oil out on cities. And actually at the start of Grace of Kings, the current controlling superpower of the region got his control because they were able to create these great airships and get military domination over their opponents because of these airships. And then there's other sort of steampunk technologies that come into play. And those are sort of the vibes I get from the world. And it's definitely not like a traditional like Brandon Sanderson magic system, or not even like a Game of Thrones magic system, which also has magic more in the background similar to this series. But Game of Thrones has more like traditional like dragons, etc., etc. Also, the writing style in this feels like it could be a History Channel documentary where we've got a very detailed description of what's going on, and then we cut to two characters who exchange interesting and relevant dialogue. And then we go back to narration, and the dialogue's always done in the same way. It's person A talks, person B talks, A talks, or it's A, B, A, B, A. It's almost always done in that way where it's back and forth between two people. And if there's like a group meeting, that's more like narrated and there's less confusing big conversations. Again, there might be a little exchange in a big group of people, but usually Ken Liu focuses in on like a very specific and important and relevant conversation that he wants you to focus on. And I think that's awesome. And you know, these are long books, but I feel like Ken Liu gets the most out of every page in terms of what information he's able to convey to you, what emotions he's able to convey to you through the characters. And yeah, it's interesting because I rarely talk about writing style too much on this channel, or not this explicitly, because a lot of times I don't notice it if I enjoy it. But in this book, I do notice it and I do like it, which is fairly rare. Because usually when I'm picking things out about writing style, it's because I don't like the writing style. So yeah, I'm very excited to continue on with this series. Up next, finally, lastly, The Color of Law was my nonfiction buddy read pick for February. I'm still in the middle of it, but we're getting there. And then my March pick, I also started already, The Consequences of Capitalism by Noam Chomsky and Marv Waterstone. And these are lectures from their co-taught class at Arizona State and I'm not sure the name of the class. I think the name of the class is probably Consequences of Capitalism, Manufacturing Discontent and Resistance. But yeah, both of these are phenomenal reads. Let's start with The Color of Law. This book outlines the history of housing discrimination and discrimination within city planning in the United States, basically since slavery. And yeah, some of this stuff I knew, some of this stuff I kind of knew, but this goes into like another level of detail. And some of this stuff I just didn't know. And all of the stuff in Color of Law is important historical context for us to have, and any sort of New Deal plan or big social infrastructure spending we have going forward, we'll have to make sure it's not exclusive and discriminatory. That is, of course, if we have public spending. If we have private spending, obviously this book goes into great detail about how private companies and insurance companies and real estate companies had discriminated. Also, unions are talked about. Sometimes unions did great things in terms of standing up for the rights of black workers, and I think unions can be a tool to do that. However, a lot of times, and I would dare to say more often than not, unions sold out their black workers, and oftentimes they worked with corporations or compromised with corporations, I guess you could say, to make it so that a black person was never a supervisor or superior in any working capacity to a white person. Yeah, this happened across industries in multiple sectors for decades and decades in the early to mid 1900s. And some of these things, even at a state level, extended into the late 1900s as well. And this book pretty clearly goes through why the discrimination was unconstitutional, and I have issues with the Constitution and whatever, but it is the law of the land, and it definitely should be upheld in these cases in terms of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And yeah, even though housing and housing discrimination and neighborhood segregation and stuff like that is much more difficult to do now and completely illegal to do explicitly now, the segregation from the time has echoed into today in various ways, whether it comes from building intergenerational wealth, which the black community had a more difficult time doing because of their smaller property values and their discrimination when it comes to jobs and the jobs they could have and their lack of ability to have leadership roles. But in addition to that, neighborhoods that were formerly segregated 40 to 60 to 80 years ago, they're still fairly segregated, even though they're not legally white-only neighborhoods or legally black-only neighborhoods. There are still communities that are mostly white or mostly black because of the segregation that happened a few decades ago. And yeah, consequences of capitalism. So this is a series of lectures. So if you don't like series of lectures, you may not like this. But overall, I think this is well done, and the lectures seem very on point. I also got the audiobook in the Audible sale for pretty cheap a few days ago, so I've been going through that. And yeah, I feel like I'll talk about this book more in my next wrap-up, probably. Also, obviously, Noam Chomsky is great. Manufacturing Consent, which is his most famous book, still holds up today, and I would recommend anyone checking that out. But yeah, this book has everything you'd want in an analysis of society today, whether it's what we do and don't think is possible in a society, common sense, quote unquote, whether it's imperialism or colonialism, exploitation, concentration of wealth, things like what the media does and doesn't focus on. All of these things are definitely touched upon in a very succinct way, and I feel like I can recommend this to anyone. Also, Capitalist Realism, which is a book by Mark Fisher, which I read last year. I feel like this is a good introduction to that as well. And this book also kind of outlines capitalist realism in a more approachable way for most people than Mark Fisher's actual capitalist realism work outlines it. But basically, the idea of capitalist realism is that it is easier to envision the end of the world than it is to envision the end of capitalism. And everyone having these sort of capitalist ideas as our sort of common sense to society. And because everyone has those ideas, how does that affect us? And how does that affect our society more broadly? And obviously, like conservatives don't like that framing because many conservatives don't want to believe that society is a thing that exists. People like Margaret Thatcher and the Reaganite economics people, basically Republicans, I guess. But yeah, I mean, society does exist for right wingers. Come on, let's not be silly. They just only acknowledge it existing when it's convenient to them. Like when they talk about big tech, and like, don't get me wrong, I've got issues with, media consolidation of everything from online media to print media to TV media. I've got issues with that. But the media landscape is absolutely a societal thing that exists. I mean, you can't get away from it. Society exists. I don't know. But yeah, this book definitely comes at it from more of a leftist perspective, I would say, on a lot of things. But it certainly doesn't exclude right-wing voices or like 1984 or do anything scary or anything. Like a lot of, right-wing intellectuals are quoted in here, from anyone from Adam Smith to our founding fathers to Hume and other philosophers of that era, and just everyone. I think it's a solid read. I don't know what else to say. It's also good to listen to just because, this was lectures. So if you can get it on audiobook, yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, that is everything. Like, comment, subscribe, join my Discord if you want to talk about any of these books. And yeah, see you guys next time. Oh, also, Brandon Sanderson, Cytonic. Maybe I'll get to it. I probably won't because I'm not reading too quickly this year, but hopefully I get to it. Oh, and Brandon Sanderson, guys, his announcement. We'll talk about that more later. See you guys next time.